Father, I pray that those wouldn't just be words that I sing, but truly the attitude of my heart. I'm so grateful that, man, you saved me out of the kingdom of darkness, that you're sanctifying, changing me, and I know there's many ways that my heart holds on to this world. And Father, I pray you would do that work needed to make me more like Jesus through your indwelling Spirit. And I pray that would be the attitude of our hearts this morning. Father, as we look at your word, we believe that it's living and active, that it's powerful. And so I pray that as I empty myself, you'd fill me with your Spirit to use your word, to care for, to shepherd, to feed, to meet the needs of your flock. I pray that we would see your Son, Jesus Christ, high and lifted up, and seeing that truth would lead to a very real peace and trust that allows us to draw close to him and be changed by him to look more like him. So I admit I have nothing to offer. As I read your word, would you do your work for your glory? In Jesus' name, amen. Welcome. First announcement, New Hillside Fellowship app out. There should be a sticker right on the back in front of you. You can look at downloading that. You'll get all the information you need. It'll be super duper awesome. You'll love it. It will meet every need you have. That's not false. It won't. Only Jesus can do that. But it will be fun. You can check it out. That's announcement number one. Announcement number two, December 6th. We are having a super duper groovy meeting. It's going to be awesome. It's going to put the groove back in groovy. You're going to want to be here. Alan is going to present on facilities. You know we're a family, and the kind of family we are matters because the kind of family we are at Hillside determines the kind of disciples we make. You know that we're being formed into Jesus' image. He uses community, walking authentically to do that. You know we want to be fruitful. Part of that is facilities that allow us to live out that vision and mission. So come listen to Alan present on that. I hear he's going to wear a Bob Ross wig just to be super duper groovy. So you're not going to want to miss it because normally he's bald and now he'll have a huge fro. So I'm going to be here. That's going to be fun. That's announcement number two. Announcement number three, newcomers, welcome. And Jim, welcome. Always glad to see you. I always think he leaves the church, but he comes back, and I love that. He's actually a friend of mine. I'm just joking with him. Glad you're here. My name's Dave. There's nothing special about me. I'm a new creature in Christ, recovering addict, alcoholic that Jesus has changed. So we're really glad you're here. There's one thing you need to know about us. We believe that Jesus changes everything, but change is complex. I don't know if you know that. Change isn't simple, it's incredibly complex. We're thinking, feeling, doing beings, but Jesus uses his word in community through his Spirit to change us, to make us look more like him. So we're really glad that you're here. We've been looking at how Jesus historically has changed everything. He's done it through the church. And so we're looking at the book of Acts because it's the earliest account of the Christian church. It's where this all began. This isn't an accident. It's not haphazard. It began with the resurrection of Jesus and then the commission that Jesus sent these boys out to go preach the gospel that sets the captives free. And that's continued on even to today. So today we're going to look at, it's Mission Impossible. It's chapter 25 and 26, 2 chapters, but it's one story. So I'm going to break it down. I will call this, I was going to call it the Queen's Gambit declined versus Tartakower's defense, but I didn't figure that would connect with anybody. Nobody? Okay, that's why I didn't call it that. I'll call this simply Election Survival Guide Part 2. I think that'll be more helpful. Anybody still working through the stages of grief, denial, anger? No, honestly, I am. Listen, I told you last week, lifelong Republican. I don't hide that. I also don't pressure or push anybody. But, man, so every election cycle, I'll either get too elated or too depressed. And I've got to work through my own grief. So if anybody else is there, I'm going to show you how Jesus used this passage to expose my heart to look more like Jesus. And so I'll just fillet what Jesus is doing in my heart through this passage. And if the pants fit, or if put it on if it fits. I don't know what it is. All right? Somebody said something about some garment of clothing, and if it fits, you should wear it. Let's just get into the text. I'm going to start where we're going to end up so that you can see how chapter 25 flows into 26. We think Paul's on defense here. We think Paul's on trial. You're going to see Paul's not on trial. Festus Agrippa, Bernice, the commanders, the kings, and everybody there ends up on trial. It's this beautiful twist and turn. It is how God does what he does. Watch this. So here's Paul's trial. Chapter 26, verse 24 down through 29, God says, Luke writes, while Paul was saying this or these things in his own defense, Festus said in a loud voice, Paul, you are out of your mind. Your great learning is driving you mad. But Paul said, I'm not out of my mind, most excellent Festus. In fact, I utter words of rationalized truth or sober truth. For the king, this is Agrippa, he knows about these matters, and I speak to him also with confidence, since I'm persuaded that none of these events or things escaped his notice, for this has not been done in a corner. King Agrippa, Paul's now asking King Agrippa a question. Do you believe the prophets? I know that you do. Agrippa now replied to Paul, in a short time you will persuade me to become a Christian. And Paul said, I would wish to God that whether in a short or long time, not only you, Agrippa, but also all who hear me this day might become such as I am, except for these chains. Let me frame this sermon for you. Big picture, God wins. And it's very simple. It's the same as last week. But you know how someone wins matters. How somebody wins matters. Like if you've just got a sovereign, omnipotent God who just wins all the time, people would get very sick of it. It's like Tom Brady. Amen? It's like I wish Tom would just retire. Like just quit winning. He's dashed my Super Bowl hopes over and over. Is he a good player? Sure, and I dislike him because he just keeps winning. That's what happens if you just win all the time. Watch this. How does a sovereign, omnipotent God who rules absolutely for all eternity win in such a fashion that everybody's like, wow? See, how you win matters, and how Jesus wins is the wow factor to the gospel. He starts from a position of weakness. So God wins. That's a big theological picture, Genesis to Revelation. Here's the small theological picture. This is what you feel after election when you work through the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, working towards acceptance. Wherever you're at on that spectrum, sin, Satan, hell, death, the grave, the enemy loses. And he loses in spectacular fashion because everyone thinks he's going to win. History has played out that it looks like sin is powerful. It looks like Satan in the kingdom of darkness is winning. So what God does to show us that from a position of weakness, the cradle, the cross, and the coffin, he totally wins in a fashion that's going to have everybody go, wow. He sends his son, Jesus Christ, and Jesus lives a life without sin so he can take a position as a servant, so that from that position he can show us, from that position of weakness, wow can happen. From that position of weakness, from that position of servitude, winning in a wow fashion really can happen. Now, before I get into chapter 25 and 26, let me explain. I'm just going to walk you through the flow of text so you understand it. Chapter 25, verses 1 through 3. The problem is still there. The Jews want to kill Paul. That's bad news. They're setting an ambush again. Chapter 25, verses 4 through 12, we look at the politics of it. Festus knew the right decision to make. Paul did nothing wrong. Festus should have let Paul go. But instead, we're going to see the politics of it. Festus wants to do the Jews a favor. And it looks like evil is winning again. And that angst towards politics comes up. It's like, I just want justice and right. Just do what's right. That's going to come up. So we've got our problem, we've got the politics, and then we've got God's slow pace. It's just a long conversation between Festus and Agrippa. And when I read it, you're going to be like, why is this in the Bible? If I had to detail 30 years, I don't know that I would add this much ink for a conversation between Festus and Agrippa. But then you're going to see Festus gathers the people. He gathers Agrippa, Bernice, Festus, the kings, the commanders, the prominent people, to hear the gospel, because all of them have to know what to write to Caesar as they send Paul there. So they're all having to investigate the gospel. They all have to get it exactly right. And so God is now going to use sin to trap sin in this perfect Wile E. Coyote moment. If I were to sum up chapter 25 and 26, it would be this: how Jesus got the gospel to Rome. And it's not how you think. Now, with that, I've given you the intellectual, philosophical, biblical, theological outline. That works one part of your brain. So now let me jump in and work another part of your brain so you can follow me through this story. How many of you were alive in 1972? Okay, it's most of you. This is awesome. You guys are a lot older than I thought. 1972, height of the Cold War, right, Adam? I mean, this is just USA versus Russia, all kinds of tension. I was going to be born in 1975. By 1980, one of my first memories, hiding under my desk at school because the Ruskies were going to bomb us. They were going to nuke us. It was just bad. 72, height of the Cold War. We decided to fight it out in a different way. It was a chess match. It was a chess match, world championship chess match between Bobby Fischer and what? Yeah, Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky, am I right? Okay, yeah, that's right. The old people remember. Because it was a big deal back then. It was a big deal back then. And so the world, literally, it was tuning in to this American chess champion and this Russian chess champion, Boris Spassky. And everyone was watching. And as Bobby Fischer, game 6, it was called the greatest chess game ever played. And in game 6, Bobby Fischer got to go first. And everyone was watching. This was in Reykjavik, Iceland. Everybody was tuned in and watching. Bobby Fischer he sat down, and he went to make his first move. And when everyone saw the move he made, they gasped. It was, he moved C4. That's called the Queen's Gambit declined. And why everybody gasped was this. No professional, real, serious chess player had ever played the Queen's Gambit declined as their first move. Never. Nobody had won playing that. It was foolishness. Fischer had already quit one game. The second game, he was like, I'm done. And so the Americans were watching. They're like, oh, this is it. Game over. Why don't you just throw in the towel, Bobby? Well, Spassky thought the same thing. In fact, he played E6, Tartakower's defense. And everybody just groaned because Spassky had never, ever lost a game when he played Tartakower's defense. So it was on this side, Fischer had never won. No serious player had ever won. On this side, Tartakower's defense, USSR, never lost. The game was over before it began, and everyone got sick to their stomach. Depression, frustration, because we wanted to win that chess match, but ultimately the Cold War. Now, I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but no, I may wrap up the end of the sermon, depending on time. Watch, it is always from a position of weakness and foolishness that God comes from behind and changes everything. It is the wow factor, and that's where I'll end up today. Watch how God used this passage just to expose my heart. I want to share with you today how God has used this election cycle to expose sin in me that I really have needed to repent of for a long time. He just happened to use the pressure from outside to expose what was inside of me so that I could put a name to it. I'll show it to you as we walk through the wow factor of this passage. Start out chapter 25, verses 1 through 3. First, he used this election cycle to change my perspective on something. I'll show you here. Verses 1 through 3. Watch, God says, Luke writes, Festus then, having arrived in the province 3 days later, went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. and the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews. These are the leaders of the nation. These are the spiritual shepherds of the nation. These are the people that all Israel looked to for spiritual direction. The chief priests and the leading men of Jews brought charges against Paul, and they were urging Festus, requesting a concession against Paul that he, Festus, might have him, Paul, brought to Jerusalem. Watch this. At the same time, they were setting an ambush to what? Kill him. They were going to kill Paul. Let me ask you this. How do you become a religious leader, a spiritual shepherd of your nation, and still have murder in your heart? Where you are literally planning the demise and planning to murder somebody else, but you're okay with it. Let me tell you what this election cycle did in me. Has anybody else ever thought to themselves, never out loud? I don't think we would ever say this out loud, but because this is a safe space, I'm going to share it. Have any of you ever thought, well, I know hate is wrong, rage is wrong, anger, I know, but it's just a little sin. Anybody ever thought that? It's just a little. Don't raise your hands. I'll raise mine. It's amazing. This election cycle, it's amazing as I work through depression, anger, frustration, bitterness, rage, hate. My mind tells me it's just a little bitterness. It's just a little resentment towards the Democrats. It's not a big deal. Sin always grows. Sin undealt with will grow, and it will grow to an extent that it will take you out. Anybody ever gone to Las Vegas and seen Siegfried and Roy? One. Okay, well, two. Nobody wants to admit they went to Las Vegas. I get it. I would never go, but other people might go. Dave, I've heard of Siegfried and Roy, but I would never go to Sin City. Well, when I went, it's amazing because these guys are playing with lions and tigers. It's astounding. And these tigers, these white Siberian tigers, obey Siegfried and Roy. Until one day, Manticore, beautiful white tiger. And Roy Horn had spent his whole life with Manticore. He had raised him for 7 years. Manticore had never shown aggression until that day, when he had grown to a point where he stood over Roy and said, you're not in control of me anymore, and grabbed him, broke his neck, and dragged him off stage. Sin always grows. See, as a recovering addict or alcoholic, I can tell you, I'm in control. I'm in control of my drinking, right? And your sin will grow. I would write down Genesis chapter 4, verse 7. Sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you. It's not a little anger. It's not a little bitterness. It's not a little resentment. That will grow, and that will take you out. How else do you end up being a spiritual religious leader and plotting murder? I can tell you how, because I've ended up there. You just let a little hate. You just nurture it because it feels good to hate the one who killed your brother. It feels good. And as you play with that and you nurture it, you begin to dream about it. It's the same with lust. It's the same with greed. You just begin to play with it, and it begins to grow a little bit until one day you're no longer in control of it. It controls you, and it devours you. I would write this as the general principle. If we only pay attention to the outside and ignore what's on the inside, we will end up on the wrong side. In fact, it'll be the dark side. Darth Vader wasn't always Darth Vader, bro. He used to be Anakin. You ever watch Star Wars? Obi-Wan told him no, and he played with that. He thought about that. So, number one, the Lord said, Dave, it's not just a little sin. That resentment will lead to relapse. That needs to be repented of. Now, watch what comes next. This is frustrating because this is just politics. Chapter 25, verses 4 through 12. I'm going to read verse 9 because this is the frustrating part. This is the part when you look at politics in America, don't we just want righteousness and justice to be done? Just do what's right. Quit abusing and using and manipulating. And I'll talk to the whole political system. We just want righteousness where we can trust the judgments that are coming out. Well, that's because you were made by God from a garden, in a garden, for a garden, with a perfect king that rules perfectly. So that's good. I want you to feel that. But we live in a fallen, broken world, don't we? The kingdom of darkness. Watch what happens. I'm going to read 25:9. Paul's on trial. He's done nothing wrong. Festus knows he's done nothing wrong. Verse 9 is what frustrates me. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, Festus was he's a consummate politician. Rome had put him there. He had to keep Rome happy, but he had to oversee the Jews, so he had to keep the Jews from rioting. So he was just trying to figure out how to schmooze it. He was a schmoozer. And he wished to do the Jews a favor. And so he said to Paul, "Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges?" Well, no. Paul knew he was going to get offed. He was like, no. So here's how God uses even broken, bloated, twisted up governments. Watch this. But Paul said, this is so good, "I'm standing before Caesar's tribunal where I ought to be tried. I've done no wrong to the Jews, as you yourselves know very well. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of those things is true of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them, because I appeal to Caesar." He was a Roman citizen. So he said, I appeal to Caesar. Therefore, as a Roman citizen, I have to go to Caesar. Verse 12, "Then when Festus had conferred with his council, he answered, 'You have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you shall go.'" See, we get frustrated. I get frustrated at government. It's like it's not that hard. Apply a little common sense. Surely we can work this out, right? And so I get frustrated, and that leads to bitterness, anger, resentment, and that, for me, leads to relapse. What Jesus has been working in me is a change in perspective. You see, as a conservative, we've put so much hope in government for so long. Since the 70s were declared the year of the evangelical, we have felt very powerful, very good. And I have put a lot of hope in government to do good things for me and to advance the gospel and to advance righteousness and justice. It's so good for me to realize this statement that I'm about to tell you. You see, government is not God. It is a gift from God. I'm going to say that again. Government is not God. It is a good gift from God. No amen. So let me explain it this way. Through a question, I find Socratically, questions will often help. How many of you have ever gotten socks, T-shirts, or any other garments for Christmas? Oh, wow, what a bummer. I'm so sorry. Isn't that? I mean, did you have fun playing with your socks, Matthew? Was that fun? When you took the T-shirts out of the Christmas wrapping, were you like, this is perfect. I'm going to go play with my T-shirts. You didn't, did you? It was like, oh, these are very functional. Thank you for my functional gift. For me, I'll get Old Spice gift packets, so I'll get Swagger shampoo. I don't play with Swagger shampoo. I don't have fun with Swagger shampoo. I have never had fun with an Old Spice gift basket. Just never. It's not fun for me. Government is not God. It is a gift from God. Do you know every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights? Not every gift is for fun. Some gifts are for functionality. Not every gift is for play. Some gifts are for your preservation and protection. I read a book. It was written in 1953. William Golding is a British author. It was called Lord of the Flies. Anybody read it? Listen, when I finished that book, I realized bad, broken, bloated government is better than no government at all. And I love Romans 13:1 and 2. Submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every human institution. They may not be fun and they may not be a plaything, but they are functional. The government is functional, and it is for our preservation and protection. So he does not ask that I support the government because, honestly, there aren't very many planks in the Democratic Party I can support. Praise God, he doesn't ask me to support the government. He asks me to submit to it as that entity that is there for my preservation and protection because it's there to restrain evil. Government's never going to get it right. Even Republican government isn't going to get it right. I struggle to say that because there's a lot of guns in the room. And you guys know there are. But honestly, if we're willing to be honest with ourselves, does not the repentance need to come from me, from putting my hope in government to do what only my God can do? Government's never gotten it right. Do you know where we got our republic, our constitutional republic, our form of government from? It's right here. It's Rome. It's where we derived it from, and government has never gotten it right. Now watch this. Here's the good news. But our God has always used crooked sticks to draw straight lines. And even when Festus gets it wrong, guess what our God does? He gets it right. He says, all right, Festus won't let you go. I'll use Festus to send you to Caesar. In fact, you want to know the wow factor? I'm going to make Festus write out the gospel word for word now. He's going to have to investigate why he's sending you to Caesar. So Festus is going to have to involve all his buddies in investigating who this dead man named Jesus who came back to life is. That's how God does. It's amazing. So number one, God changed my perspective on sin. There is no little sin. Number two, he changed my perspective on government. Government never gets it right, never has. My God always gets it right. Government isn't God. God is God. But government is a good gift from God. So I can pray for my leaders because leadership is insanity. It really is hard. Now, watch this. Watch what comes next. This is so frustrating for me. Anybody else a hurrier, a doer, a goer? Your mind is racing. You keep lists. You've got yellow pads everywhere. You're just writing. Like you want life to go at a certain pace, right? You want to get it all done yesterday. The day before yesterday. Thank you, Lewis. I want it done a long time ago because I'm very important. I've got a lot of things to do. I don't know what those are, but I'll think of them later. Watch it. God just doesn't work on our timetable. Watch this. Verse 13, it's 13 down through 22. This is just a long, slow, painful conversation between Festus and Agrippa. Now when several days had elapsed, I'm going to even read it slow just to... Now when several days had elapsed, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea, and they paid their respects to Festus. While they were spending many days there. So Paul's just waiting in lockup, and all of these days are going by. So frustrating for me. While they were spending many days there, Hey, Herb, I didn't see this. So, sorry. While they were spending many days there, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, now watch this. There's a man who was left in prison by Felix. And when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation, a death sentence. Well, verse 16, I answered them that it's not the custom of the Romans to hand over any man before the accused meets his accusers face to face and has an opportunity to make his defense against the charges. So after they had assembled here, I did not delay, but on the next day I took my seat on the tribunal. This is Festus talking to Agrippa. This is just a conversation. I took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought before me. Well, when the accusers stood up, they began bringing charges against Paul, but not of such crimes as I was expecting. Now watch this. Agrippa now, you've got to see what's happening. Agrippa, Festus is going to be explaining the gospel to Agrippa. You've got two lost people trying to understand the gospel. But they simply had some points of disagreement with him about their own religion, about a dead man named Jesus, who Paul asserted to be alive. See, politics are frustrating. Watch how Jesus uses this broken political system to create this beautiful, beautiful cross-pollination where now you have lost people trying to understand what the gospel is. There was this dead man named Jesus, and Paul says he was alive. I don't mean any disrespect. This is just one of those passages that we Christians would consider boring. Nobody gets saved. No miracles. There's no wow factor. It's two dudes talking about what they're going to write down to send to Caesar. We would skip over this if we were reading. We'd be like, okay, it's just a conversation. Here's what I want you to know. God's pace is painfully slow. He created flowers, and flowers need pollination. Pollination is not exciting, but pollination is essential to give people time and space to work through truth, to give people the ability, without pressure, anxiety, panic, stress, and worry, to process a message is absolutely essential. Now, you're not with me. How many of you enjoy brisket? Are most of you from California? You like tofu? No, I thought we were in... sorry, the Californians. I just assume you guys like tofu, not brisket. Honestly, brisket. You guys like brisket? The black, the charcoal on the outside? Brisket takes a lot of time. You know that? Like generally, you got to get the temperature right, the smoke right. It takes like an hour per pound. So you got to leave that brisket in there at the right temperature with the right smoke, sometimes upwards 20, 24 hours to get that bark, they call it, the crust. It's what I love about Texas. Like burnt ends, Lewis threw it out there. Delicious. I just call them delicious. I just call it delicious meat. How many of you like a brisket that's been thrown in a microwave, doused in liquid smoke? Oh, we even got, we almost, Texans, again, I don't talk like that very often. It's very offensive, and you might get shot in Texas. You put a brisket in a microwave and dump liquid. God doesn't use liquid smoke. That's what I'm getting. You read through this passage, you're like, it's so slow, speed up. Listen, you want your brisket in the microwave dumped with liquid smoke? It's disgusting. God doesn't use liquid smoke. He is not slow about his promises, as some count slowness, 2 Peter 3:9. He's patient towards us. You want to know why our families fall apart? You want to know why our communities fall apart? You want to know why most of us will never have a neighbor over? You want to know why we've got so much political angst in this nation? We want what we want, and we want it now. It's not patience. Patience for what? I would rather absolutely demonize, dismiss, and devour other people than be patient as Jesus allows that brisket to smoke so that it's wonderful and incredible. God doesn't use liquid smoke. Listen, I don't like bees. I sit in my backyard for a long time, and I would just try and kill them. I had a bug assault gun. For me, it was fun. It was like hunting in my backyard. My wife and I are very, very different. To my wife, bees are precious, precious things that carry pollen from one plant to another. She says, Dave, don't you kill those. Don't you kill those. Pollination may not be exciting, but it is essential. See, God's patient towards us. He knows that your heart, most of us simply live on the outside. He knows that our hearts need that patient tenderness to work through the gospel message, to realize, I've sinned greatly, and my sin is against God. And most of us just need time to work through denial, anger, depression, towards acceptance just on that point, and then to slowly realize, and God so loved me that he sent his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believes shall not perish. That takes time to pollinate. That takes time to grow. Be patient. God's not done. So when you look at these passages and you're just like, the pace is too slow, realize God doesn't use liquid smoke. Watch what comes next. This is astounding because in verse 22, once Festus had described it to Agrippa, verse 22, then Agrippa said to Festus, I would also like to hear this man myself. Festus says, tomorrow you shall hear him. God's setting up the chess match. Now he's going to have Festus, Agrippa, Bernice, Paul, all hearing the gospel. Watch what comes next. This one really exposed me. And again, I'll just expose my own heart. So if you disagree with me, you can tell me why you disagree, but I'm just going to expose the sin in my own heart. Watch this. I'm just going to go verse 23 on this one. So on the next day, when Agrippa came together with Bernice, and I've just got to stop right there. I can't go much further. I don't like Agrippa, and I don't like Bernice. Do you know why? Why? Agrippa, this is technically Agrippa II. He is the last of the Herodian dynasty. His real name is Herod Agrippa II. Now, there were no good Herods. They were all psychopaths. Starting out with Herod the Great. He was like, a baby's threatening me. We shall murder not only that baby, but every baby in Bethlehem. That's a sicko. That angers me. That's the sickness that got passed down. His uncle, he took people to the prom he shouldn't have. And John the Baptist called him out. Guess what he did to John the Baptist? Took his head off. That angers me. I don't like people like that. I get bitter, frustrated when I see evil win. Well, go to Herod Agrippa II, wicked man. He was also ruling over Judea. He was a twisted, sick man. I'm getting all kinds of mental yellow flags because we've got kids present. Bernice was his sister, and he would take Bernice to the prom. So what started in the family just ran downhill, and they were sick people. When I read that, I think, this man doesn't deserve to hear the gospel. He deserves to be run through. He deserves to be done away with. Then you get further in. They came, watch, and now I'm just going to start exposing my heart. Please forgive me if it offends anyone. They came together with Bernice, a brother and sister came together, but they were going to the prom together amid great pomp. So now what you have is the red carpet. It's like the Oscars. It's like Hollywood. And do you know who else I don't think deserves the gospel? Hollywood. I just don't like them. I think they've twisted everything up. I think they've taken a culture and distorted it and broken it. And while we're talking about Hollywood, guess who else I don't think deserves the gospel? The entire mainstream media. I think all of them should be cut off and separated from the grace of God. Well, let's go on. Well, I threw in California. Oh, you know who else? Even though I love a lot of my friends in Oregon, we're crazy. We're crazy. And if you're going to riot and legalize everything bad, I don't think you deserve the grace of the gospel either. I think you should be cut off. Anybody else? Oh, I haven't even started on the East Coast yet. Right? I'm just on the West Coast and the media and Bernice and Agrippa. That's where it all started, all right? And I just want to get it out there because, listen, I know most of us are there. And we come to church, we're like, no, I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay. No, we're not. Who are you trying to fool? Watch what comes next. They entered with great pomp and entered the auditorium accompanied by the commanders. So now you have the chiliarchs. These were the generals. They were they ruled over the Roman military. So you had all of this pomp and all of this influence and everybody walking down to music and doing their thing. Not only the commanders, but all the prominent men of the city. So you had the wealthy Wall Street traders. You had everybody who was anybody in this city was there. And I don't like any of them. I don't. You know what Jesus exposed in my heart through this election cycle? I've realized that as a Republican, it is now acceptable to despise, disdain, dismiss, devour, and demonize 70 plus million people in America. It is now not only okay, it's expected. Pastor, why won't you tear them up? Why won't you chew them up? Point out everywhere they're wrong. We'll disdain them. We'll despise them. We'll dismiss them. We'll denigrate them. We'll demonize them. We'll put a label and a name on them and say, good luck. You're heading towards hell. It's hot. You should probably repent. Do you know it's okay in our political system now to despise people? I'm reading through this and realizing all the people in my heart that I hate, all the people that are ruining my country, and I'm fearful for my kids. And I realize, Lord Jesus, help me. Because you could have despised me, denigrated me, dismissed me, and demonized me while I was blaspheming you, while I was living in sin, while I was rejecting the truth of the gospel. You could have devoured me with your wrath and anger, but he didn't. Instead, he demonstrated his love towards me, and that while I was yet a sinner, I was still his enemy, y'all. I was still his enemy. And what did he do? He demonstrated his love, because love is greater than hate. I've spent the last 2 weeks just repenting, because I live in a system where it's okay to demonize 75 million people. Friends, I read the gospel, I read the Bible. He's never told me, he never commissioned me to go win elections. He didn't. I read the whole thing. There's 1,196 pages, 782,815 words. Nowhere in there did he say, Dave, go win elections. He didn't tell me, go win arguments. You realize that. He didn't say, Dave, get so stinking intellectually smart that you can get up and speak and twist people intellectually into a ball and be like, boom, I win, you lose. I want to do that. Did you see my body language there? I totally want to do that. He didn't call me to win elections. He didn't call me to win arguments. He called me to win souls. And see, it's not the healthy that need a physician, it's the sick. And if I demonize, denigrate, dismiss, and devour 74 million people, I'll never win the opportunity to win a hearing, to win a soul. So I've had to do a lot of repenting. You see what Jesus told Paul and Paul told Timothy, 2 Timothy chapter 2, 24, 25, 26. The Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome. How many marital issues would that fix? Not be quarrelsome, patient when wronged, able to teach, gently correcting those in opposition. Our political system does the opposite. We quickly devour, dismiss, divide, demonize, and just let them go. That's sin, and that was in my heart. I know that had to have impacted you, because whatever's in the shepherd's heart impacts the people, and I'm so sorry for that. Watch what comes next. This is the brilliance of it, the beauty of it. And I'll sum this up as simply as I can. I know it's the entire chapter, 26, but Paul's defense, we've already gone over this twice. It's just his story. Here's who I was, sinner. Here's who I met. His name is Jesus Christ. And here's who I am. I'm a sinner saved by grace, being sanctified to look more like Jesus. Now, I want you to see the brilliance of how Paul interacts with this, because we happen to live in a culture now that whoever yells the loudest gets a hearing. It's exhausting. We're not quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. We're quick to speak, slow to listen, and we abide in anger. We're overcome with anger. I love Paul's picture here. I want Jesus to work this into my life. Watch where Paul starts out. He's been quiet. Chapter 26, verse 1. Agrippa said to Paul, you are permitted to speak for yourself. Number one, wait for the opportunity. Wait for the invitation to speak. Most of my life has been about earning the right to share truth. Most people, I don't come in hot and heavy like a kamikaze Christian. I wait. I earn the right. Agrippa, Paul, you're now able to speak. What Paul does next is brilliant. You'll miss it because in the West, we miss it. We told it. Do you know that the art of persuasion is very difficult? Persuading anyone of anything is very difficult. I didn't connect. Have you ever tried to persuade your spouse towards a position that he or she does not believe? You ever been successful, I should ask, in persuading your spouse? It's difficult, isn't it? It's not even funny. We're like, that's hard. Socrates wrote a book, I'm sure it impacted Paul. Paul sat under Gamaliel. Persuasion is incredibly complex because we're thinking, feeling, doing beings. As Socrates went through it, he said you have ethos, pathos, and logos. You have ethos, your ethic, how you live your life. You have pathos, how you connect and how you have compassion. So you have ethos, pathos, and you have logos. You have the content of the message you're communicating. If you want to persuade, your ethos, logos, and pathos, how you live, your message you preach, and how you connect with people all have to be aligned. This is just the physics of mechanics. You need alignment. And Socrates knew that. He wrote about it in Rhetoric. If you don't have that, guess what you use? It's a Greek word. It's called phobos. It's not ethos, pathos, and logos. It's phobos, fear. You live in a world that no longer has an ethic they live by, a logic of message, content, or a pathos of connection and relationship. So guess what we have now? Anxiety, panic, fear, stress, and worry. It's incredibly powerful. You'll study it in law school. You'll study it in psychology. It's called lizard brain. It's the limbic system. If you can get people freaked out, you can short-term move them to do what you want. That's just fear. Watch what Paul does here. And oftentimes people ask me, Dave, why don't you do an altar call? Why don't you preach about hell? And I start by correcting them and say, I've been here 20 years, and every time hell comes up in this book, we talk about it. You're asking me, why don't I use fear to manipulate and bring about an end that you want to feel good so you don't have to share Christ with your neighbors? And I'm not okay with that. I will not use ungodly, unhealthy fear. I want to use ethos, pathos, logos, like Paul did. Watch. I'll show you. Brilliant. Watch where Paul starts. 26. He starts here, verse 4 or 5. So then, all Jews know about my manner of life from what? My youth up. Everybody has watched me. I have not bounced around. I've not hidden anything. You've watched me from my youth up, which from the beginning was spent among my own nation at Jerusalem. Since they have known about me for a... See, this is where the gospel begins. Jesus changes everything, and he begins by changing me, my ethic, how I live my life, how I live my life with Brooke, my wife, how I live my life with my children, how I live my life with Song and Trina, my neighbors, how I live my life with my community, how I live my life with you. This is called an ethic. This is the character. This is amazing to me. Jesus puts the message and the messenger in alignment. If your character is not lined up with the content of the gospel, there's misalignment and the gospel is going to be dismissed. So Paul started out and said, you guys have watched me for the last 50 years. You know my life. If anybody wants to dismiss me, you've watched my life. It's beautiful. That's character. This is why we're not saved by good works, but we are saved for good works. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that as they see your good deeds, they may glorify. Because you know this, there's not a week that goes by that some preacher doesn't fall. And when that preacher falls, it was another preacher in New York this week, heartbreaking for me. When that preacher falls, guess what? They call into question the character and ethic of every preacher. See, they're just hiding stuff. And then the gospel is tossed out. So one, it begins with the character of the messenger. What is your ethic? There is no small sin. There is no small sin. Sin grows. Watch where he goes next. I'm going to, for the sake of time, go 19 to 23. This is the content, the logos. It's not just the character of the messenger, it's the content of the message that matters. So King Agrippa, Paul says, I did not prove disobedient to the heavenly vision, but kept declaring both to those of Damascus first and also at Jerusalem and then throughout all the region of Judea and even to the Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God, performing deeds appropriate to repentance. For this reason, some Jews seized me in the temple and they tried to put me to death. So having obtained help from God, I stand to this day testifying both to small and great, stating nothing but what the prophets and Moses said was going to take place, that the Christ was going to suffer and that by reason of his resurrection from the dead, he would be the first to proclaim light both to the Jewish people and to the Gentiles. The messenger matters, your life matters. And I'll tell you, honestly, this is why most of us don't share Christ with people. I know, let me speak for myself. When I struggle most deeply with drinking, I've got friends here who walk through the whole thing with me. I did not want to share Jesus with anybody. I wanted a pastor to do it, but I didn't want to quit drinking. And so there was the shame and guilt. See, the character of the messenger matters and the content of the message. This is why I have sought to know nothing among you but Christ crucified, Christ buried, and Christ resurrected. That's the good news, and the content of the message matters. That's the logos, the word, the wisdom. Now watch where he goes next. He goes to the pathos. We get our English word pathology. It's the ability to connect, the ability to have a compassion, a very real connection with another person where it's not just intellectual, but it's real, it's emotional. Brilliant. Watch where Paul goes. Well, while Paul was saying this, verse 24, in his defense, Festus said in a loud voice, Paul, you're out of your mind and your great learning is driving you mad. Well, Paul retorts back. Paul knows he's getting to him now. Paul says, I'm not out of my mind, most excellent Festus. I'm actually speaking words of sober truth, or they're rational words. These words make sense historically, actually, practically. And now he goes from Festus to Herod Agrippa. Watch how he pulls Herod Agrippa into this, because Herod was ruling over the Jews. Herod knew all of this. His grandpa tried to kill Jesus. His uncle offed John the Baptizer. Herod knew all about Jesus Christ. So Paul goes from Festus. Now he brings Agrippa in, and he says this. The king, verse 26, the king knows about these matters. Agrippa does. And I speak to him also with confidence, since I'm persuaded that none of these things escape his notice. For this Jesus thing, who is dead and now is alive, was not done in a corner. Jesus was out there. Well, verse 27, who's on trial? Paul says, King Agrippa, do you believe in the law and prophets? Paul knew Agrippa did. Paul says, Agrippa, Festus needs to know the gospel. Do you believe in the law and prophets? Because I'm not preaching anything other than the prophets. Agrippa, do you believe? I know you do. Agrippa knows he's on trial now, so he jumps in. Verse 28, Agrippa replied to Paul, in such a short time, this is really a question. I would have interpreted this as a question, but it's fine as it is. In such a short time, do you think you'll be able to persuade me to be a Christian? Watch Paul's response. Beautiful. The pathos, the connection, the compassion, the care for the very people he's sharing Christ with. Paul says, I would wish to God that whether in a short time or a long time, not only you, Agrippa, but also all who hear me this day might become such as I am, except for, you'll miss this in the text, Paul told a joke. This is a humorous. Paul knew how to connect with the people he loved. He knew how to connect and care for them in a compassionate way. This is the pathology of it. Paul enters in and says, man, I wish you guys would all know Jesus Christ and be exactly as I am, a follower of Christ. Well, except for these chains. But he's already said he's not afraid to die. You see, this is the bottom line. Who you are matters. Your life matters because Jesus has entwined the gospel into your life. The ethic of your life matters. How you live with your spouse, how you live with your family, how you live with your neighbors, how you run your business, how you deal with Democrats, how you interact with people who disagree with you. This is the ethic that matters. The logos, the logic of the gospel matters. To say, I believe Christ has been crucified, Christ has been buried, Christ has risen again. Matters to be able to communicate that and to be able to connect with people in a meaningful way, to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, to be able to hear their story, to be able to meet them where they're at, and in empathy, care for their hearts. You see, Jesus never called us to win elections, and he never called us to win arguments. he did call us to win souls. And I'll show you. That's exactly what he's doing. How he does it is the wow factor. You see in 1972 when Bobby Fischer led out and played C4, the Queen's Gambit declined. And Boris Spassky played E6, Tartakower's defense. And everybody said, no. Did he just toss the match? Did he just concede? Why did he do it? And most every move that Bobby Fischer made, the audience would say, oh, he's just going deeper into the ditch. Spassky's he's utterly going to clean up. He's going to wipe him out. Well, as the match continued, it became very clear that Bobby Fischer was playing the greatest chess match that had ever been played on the face of the earth in all of history. In fact, as the match went on, people began to stand in awe, watching as the Queen's Gambit declined, the most foolish move ever started out in World Championship chess match, against Tartakower's defense that had never lost. He had never lost. Everyone was betting on Spassky to win that game. As that match came to an end, everyone rose to their feet to applaud Bobby Fischer. That match was so perfect that even Boris Spassky, the Russian, stood up, pushed his seat back, and applauded Bobby Fischer. And he said, that was the first perfect chess match ever played in the history of chess. What he didn't realize was that Bobby Fischer knew that Spassky was going to play Tartakower's defense, and he had studied every single move that Spassky could make. And he knew every option, every place, every alternative, every move. There was no way he was going to lose. And sure enough, he played Spassky to checkmate, and he won game 6. Friends, you may not understand the 4D chess that God is playing. You may not understand the moves he's making. You may look at elections and say, it's all over. You may look at our culture and say, it's all done. You may look at the culture wars and say, there's no hope. You may not understand every move God's making, but know this, that one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. He played the perfect chess match that's big enough to fill all eternity with wonder and awe. That's the game your God is playing. Don't you lose hope just because you don't understand one move that he made. The story's not done. And one day, not only will every knee bow and every tongue confess, but we will stand before the throne, Revelation chapter 5, and we will applaud and say, you've done perfectly. Jesus Christ, you defeated darkness, but you did it from a position of weakness, a position of servitude. He's calling us to follow him. Hillside, I don't know what will happen next. But I do know this, the darker the night, the brighter the light. This is our time to shine. Don't hate your enemies. Don't hate those who persecute you. Pray for them. Love them, because love is greater than hate. And you will see, Jesus will use this. The enemy always overshoots his mark. Our God will use this to shine a bright light and bring great salvation to many people who need it. That is Acts chapter 25 and 26. Let me pray. Father God, thank you so much for you don't just tell us you're sovereign and in control. You show us through taking Paul from prison to bringing him into this trial where he gets to share the gospel. And somehow you use Festus and Felix and Agrippa and Bernice. And within 300 years, you literally have changed the Roman Empire. With the Edict of Milan, the Nicene Creed, the Edict of Thessalonica, God, you dominate. So would you forgive me for the times that I doubt you? Would you forgive me for the times I throw up my hands? Would you forgive me for the times where I despise and denigrate and dismiss and demonize those you love to demonstrate your love towards? And Father, would you give me grace to love those who believe different than me? Would you give me grace to share the light of the glory of the gospel from a position of weakness and servitude so that people might come to put their faith in Jesus Christ. Father, would you use Hillside Fellowship to be that place of light, life, hope, and love? Would you be glorified as we surrender ourselves to you towards that end? In Jesus' name, amen.